All right, well, what you're looking at here are Venn diagrams, at least as far as we will be dealing with them in this class. Basically, it's two overlapping circles. I've had one here in blue and the other in red. And these Venn diagrams, of course, split, in fact, the entire universe up into four areas, as you can see that I've marked here. So area 1 here on the left is sort of like a Pac-Man shape moving to the right, so to speak. Area 2 is that cat eye shape in the middle. Area 3 is the Pac-Man shape going the other way. And then area 4 is everything outside of the two overlapping circles. And so as far as we're going to use Venn diagrams in this class, there are two ways that we're going to have of marking them. And so one way is when we shade, and that's going to mean that the space is empty. So that's a little bit counterintuitive, perhaps. You're going to fill up a space, and you're going to say, okay, now that space is empty. And then we also can use an X, and that means there's at least one thing here. Okay, so if we put an X in any of these four areas, we're saying there's at least one thing here in this area for sure. So we could then, just to get a better grasp of this, right, try and fill this out based on a standard form categorical proposition. So, very easily here we can come up with all cats are mammals. And so what you need to know is that the subject term, and I'll change the color here, just the subject term, cats in this case, is going to be in the blue circle, and then the predicate term, there we go, mammals, is going to be in the red circle. And so what we are saying when we say that all cats are mammals, we're saying that every single cat that there is has to be a mammal. So in other words, we could ask ourselves, could there be a cat in area 1 here, right? Well, if there was a cat in area 1, then it would not be a mammal, right? It would be outside that red mammals circle. And so we have got to make sure that no cats can get into area 1, essentially, right? So what we do to ensure that is we shade that area in. And that's what I'm doing right here. We're shading that in. That forces any cats that there are to be in area 2, right? That's the only space left for cats to be. In other words, when we say all, remember it means that if there was such a thing as the subject term, if there was such a thing as a cat, then it would be a mammal, and that's what we see here, right? If there are any cats at all, we're not saying there are, but if there were, and we know that there are, right? But if there were, they would have to be in area 2. In other words, they would have to be mammals. Okay, so that gives you a sense as to what an A statement would look like. Now, we can erase the all, change it to no. And then we'll need to erase the shading here, and hopefully I don't do too much damage to my circles. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. All right, so now let's say we're going to say that no cats are mammals. Of course, that's false, but we can certainly say it, right? Here's area 1. Well, if we're saying no cats are mammals, right, where do the cats and the mammals overlap? Of course, they overlap in area 2 here in the middle. And so what we'd want to do is shade that in to prevent any cats from getting in there, right? This says there's no such thing as something that's both a cat and a mammal. Again, that's false, but that's what this picture would say, right? So the two universal quantifiers, all and no, we're going to use the shading to depict that. Okay, but, of course, there are other possibilities here, as we know. And so we could have, let me go with the correct color here. All right. Some cats are mammals. Now, as we know, some means there is at least one. So we're saying there's at least one cat that is a mammal. So when we want to say there's at least one thing, we've got to use the X. And so where are things that are both cats and mammals? Well, hopefully you can see that they would be here in area 2, right? So we put an X in area 2 to indicate, yeah, there's at least one thing in there. There's at least one cat that's a mammal, okay? Of course, we have one more possibility here. and that is that some cats are not mammals. Now, again, that's false, right? But we can understand the claim. Some cats are not mammals. So we're saying there's at least one thing that is there's at least one cat that is not a mammal. So where are the cats? They're in the blue circle. So if we're saying there is a cat that is not a mammal, put an X here in area 1, right? There's the thing that's a cat, but it's definitely not a mammal. That's what that would say. So you can see, hopefully here, get a bit of a sense as to how we would shade or put an X in our basic understanding of Venn diagrams. And it will get more complicated from here, but this gives you the basic overview of how we mark up our Venn diagrams.